trail of bones 7 million years long. Follow it, and you solve the mystery of how we became human. Investigators are uncovering fresh clues, turning much of what we know upside down. They are finding that nature experimented wildly with the human form. Some were bizarre, giants, dwarfs, the hairy and the naked. Some may have eaten others. From this menagerie, all eerily familiar, only one survived. And we almost didn't make it. Now, step back in time onto the crowded playing field of walking apes. Look the contenders in the eye. Join the search for the ultimate survivor. It is the world's most intriguing mystery. The mystery of us. How did we get here? What happened on the journey from ape to man? Now scientists across the globe have unearthed stunning new evidence that decodes our past as never before. The trail begins somewhere in Africa. Here, apes first descended from trees and started walking on two legs. Then, astonishing things began to happen. Over the eons, these creatures morphed into a variety of weird human forms. Many lived in the same place at the same time. Some walking apes, including our own species, modern humans, undertook epic migrations out of Africa. On these journeys, they left evidence of their perilous lives. Super predators like saber-toothed cats and giant crocs hunted them. Drought, volcanoes, and maybe even other ape men killed them. To survive, we modern humans became more adaptable, cooperative, and clever. But then, something went wrong. Investigators have reached a startling conclusion. Around 70,000 years ago, we almost went extinct. What happened? How did we survive these threats to become the last walking ape standing? The one species who left the other contenders in the dust seized the planet and declared it our own. It's a captivating mystery, the search for the ultimate survivor. The answers begin with two astounding discoveries. The first just came to light on the remote Indonesian island of Flores. Here, investigators have had an incredible stroke of luck.
Serendipity, because we put down a hole here, 2 meters by 2 meters, and you land straight down on the skeleton of a whole new human species. I mean, you wouldn't set out to do that.
What they've done is find an entirely new kind of human half our height. It's one of the biggest finds in the last 50 years.
Suddenly you've got to reassess everything in you because of one discovery. One discovery is enough, one skeleton's enough to say the whole of our understanding of human history is wrong. We've got to reassess it. How many people we had, where they came from, and when they got here.
The new bones are remarkably different from anything ever seen. They've found a new species. One that will force a rewrite of the human story. At the bottom of Africa, another bone detective makes the second amazing find. These are not the bones of a dwarf. They are the bones of an ancient giant. Paleoanthropologist Lee Berger has uncovered fossils from the largest human species. Call him Goliath. Were our ancestors once giants? Investigators are on the case.
When we're working in a dig, it's like a crime scene. We are finding dead bodies. We have to figure out what killed them, why they died. It's looking back into the past to reconstruct one real moment in time.
Berger's work is a revelation. He's analyzing the bones of Goliath to create a disturbing model. The replica will reveal that our ancestors were larger than anyone may have imagined. When we stare Goliath in the eye, will we find an answer to why he is gone and we are here today? He may help us solve the mystery of why we are the ultimate survivor. Goliath and the tiny human in Indonesia are two extremes. They force us to re-examine what we thought we knew about how we evolved.
We thought of human evolution like a relay race. Here you had this early species, and it gave rise to the next early species, and it gave rise to the next one, and the next one, like this long line.
For decades, the best minds in science studied fossils and concluded that human evolution was a straightforward story. Millions of years ago, somewhere in Africa, one of our ape ancestors came down from the trees. He picked up the genetic baton that would eventually be passed to us. In the first dramatic break from the past, he started moving around on two legs, and our ancestral line was off and running. According to the old thinking, smaller-brained apes passed the genetic baton to larger-brained, smarter creatures. Then, roughly 200,000 years ago, the final baton was passed to modern humans. And we crossed the finish line. It was the prevailing scientific theory supported by the best scientific minds for most of the 20th century. And it was wrong. Instead of a relay, think melee. Not one human species at a time, but many. Nature experimented wildly with the human form. And many of these experiments confronted each other face to face. Earth hosted parallel people.
Can you imagine the profound effect that must have when those species come together? Competing creatures in the same environment. It must have been an extraordinarily stressful thing to come across another group of humans.
Evidence hints that some of these different types of humans clashed. Some might have even eaten the competition. What determined who survived? Strength may have been key, brains even more so, but neither was decisive. It could have been something else. Chance.
We would probably be horrified at how lucky we are to be here. If at any moment in the past, something hadn't pushed us in a specific direction or changed the way that we behaved, or if one predator came along to hunt us, it could be a very different picture. It almost is a miracle we're here.
How did it happen? Clues are coming out of the ground faster than ever before.
Every day we dig in Africa, every site we dig, Every place we dig, we're finding something new. Things that change the way we view human evolution.
A new generation of young investigators is unraveling the mystery of us, answering why we emerged alone from the crowded field of walking apes. Every human fossil is a prize. They are so rare that reconstructing our evolutionary path is necessarily based on limited evidence. In fact, if you gathered every piece of human fossil ever found, they would barely fill the back of a pickup truck. Put these fossils together, and they tell the riveting story of our journey. Our family tree links all species of walking apes, each a kind of human. At the top, we modern humans are alone, the ultimate survivor. Descend 7 million years and you come to the first species who split from knuckle-walking apes, a pioneer who's still unknown. Halfway up the tree, over 3 million years ago, a remarkable early relative emerges. Scientists nicknamed her Lucy. Uncovered in East Africa in the 1970s, her fossils stunned the world. Other walking ape bones had been found before, but nothing so ancient, so primitive. Lucy was the oldest bipedal ape ever found. It was as if they had discovered Eve. But if she was Eve, she didn't yet look or act like us. Lucy walked on 2 legs, but she still had 1 foot in the trees. Her long arms suggest she retains climbing skills to stay out of the reach of predators. But her skeleton is becoming human. Though she has a body and brain about the size of a chimp's, her thigh bones slant inward like ours to support her as she stands. Her pelvis morphs, no longer flat like a chimp's, it's cupped like ours to hold her guts when she's upright. Lucy's mouth becomes more human. She loses the huge canine teeth that male chimps use to threaten each other. Lucy is still different from us. Modern humans are bigger and brainier, and we've lost the long arms and fingers she needed to climb trees. Though the original Lucy fossils were found in a desert-like region of Ethiopia, her species ranged over a wide area of Africa, including the land around Lake Turkana in modern-day Kenya. Here, investigators have found more fossils of Lucy's species. Even one new piece of this creature could tell us something vital about our origins, because Lucy could be our direct ancestor. Paleontologist Louise Leakey is the 3rd generation of the Leakey clan to track human origins. Her grandparents, Louis and Mary, made pioneering discoveries of early human fossils in Tanzania's Olduvai Gorge. Here, 3 million years ago, super predators defined Lucy's world.
We've got a very large crocodile here. It's probably about 21 or so foot in length. There were 2 species at least of crocodiles living in the lake at this time, and 5 million years ago there were 5 species of crocodile.
To Leakey, this could mean that our own story may need a total rewrite.
Why should the human evolutionary record be any different?
To back up her hunch, Leakey and her team will have to find evidence of another human species, one that coexisted with Lucy. The fossil proof will be small, hidden in plain sight, somewhere in hundreds of square miles of stone. Highly trained prospectors will spend 6 days a week in temperatures up to 43 degrees, looking for bone fragments the size of a cracker.
If you think about how unlikely it is for a skeleton on a modern landscape to actually be buried quickly enough to be preserved, and then for it to ever come back up to the surface again, and then to be found by one of us wandering across the landscape. It is tremendous that we do have the fossils that we have.
So, when one of the team spots a fragment of human skull, it's always a big event. Over days of prospecting in 1999, dozens of other small pieces come out of the earth.
It didn't look very impressive when it first came out of the ground.
At first, they wonder if they've found another Lucy.
Finally, we were then able to make the measurements and begin to work out that we actually had something different.
It seems to be an entirely new human species. They nickname it Flatface. Lucy, our Eve, suddenly has a possible rival. Another walking ape who survived alongside her. Flatface lived over 3 million years ago, the same time as Lucy. It's the earliest known case of two walking apes living in the same place at the same time. So if Lucy was not alone, she might not be our ancestor after all. We could be descended from Flatface.
We suddenly had two different walking apes, from which all later human ancestors may have come. This thing that you are holding is something that we actually may have come from, way back in time.
Ever since his discovery, Flatface has been stalking Leakey's imagination. How did he communicate? How human was he? We don't know a lot about Flatface, but we do know that he makes one new point in the human story, and it's a big one.
What the flat-faced man actually did for human evolution was basically to say that diversity extended further back in time than was previously accepted.
The old relay race theory, the idea of a one-by-one line of descent from apes to us, is demolished by the discovery of Flatface. And if Flatface lived alongside Lucy nearly 3.5 million years ago, were there others? With only a single skull, it's hard to know how Flatface fits into our ancestry. We do know that he has a brain about the size of Lucy's. His teeth reveal he is a fruit eater. He struggles to survive in a world dominated by predators. Flatface doesn't have the smarts or strength to fend off crocs, especially the giants here that grew over 6 meters long. So he may have climbed trees to survive, just like Lucy. Lucy and Flatface share the same territory for thousands of years. What happens when two smart and curious creatures, similar but separate, come together? Does one try to kill the other? Do they simply compete over food? Do they ignore each other? Or are they downright chummy? For now, we don't know anything about these encounters, but we do know that one of these creatures could be our ancestor. The next fossil find might tell us which one, Lucy or Flatface. Lucy and Flatface disappear from the fossil record 3 million years ago. That's when our investigation's trail goes cold for a while. But more than 1 million years later, in an Africa turning hotter and drier, an astonishing new species appears. He is Erectus, the first creature who is more man than ape. He is the pivotal figure in our search for ancestors. He is our Adam. Nearly 2 million years ago, Erectus boasts key survival traits that set him apart from everyone else so far. Unlike earlier models such as Lucy, Erectus appears to be designed for distance running. He is the first human to have a combination of structural innovations that are now part of the modern human body. A ligament in his neck steadies his head and eyes while running. Elastic Achilles tendons act like springs to make running efficient. Strong buttocks stabilize his torso as his body leans forward during his stride. These design features prime Erectus for one of the defining moments in human history. He is the first early human known to leave Africa. Heading out beyond the horizon, that's something we modern humans would do. Called this voyager Erectus Outbound. From Lake Turkana and elsewhere in Africa, Erectus headed north. Some investigators believe that after reaching modern-day Turkey, he hung a right and headed to the eastern edge of Europe. At a village called Dmanisi in the Republic of Georgia, dig leader David Lord-Kapanitsa and geologist Reed Faring have been unearthing a series of Erectus skulls, one of the richest collections ever from a single site. So Erectus not only made the arduous journey here, he thrived. That's proof of a very human talent, adaptability. At Dmanisi, it's eat meat or die, because Georgia sometimes has icy winters when suitable plant food isn't available. Compare Erectus to chimps. They're stuck in Africa because they can't survive without fresh fruit. Imagine chimps resettling in London or Siberia. They couldn't adapt. They just don't have the brain power. When did Erectus first show this amazing ability to adapt? The answer will tell us about a critical turn on the journey from ape to man. The moment when we stopped being slaves to the environment and started to master it. Most investigators once believed this change took place no more than 1 million years ago. But Lord-Kapanitsa now thinks it was earlier, much earlier. And he's got the evidence to prove it. First, his team discovers Erectus alongside fossils of a rhino that lived only between 1.5 and 2 million years ago. The team also locates Erectus fossils below a layer from a time when the Earth's magnetic poles reversed. And finally, Erectus fossils are found under rocks that can be dated thanks to their radioactive decay. The evidence converges on one clear date. Erectus arrived in Georgia at least 1.75 million years ago. That's 700,000 years earlier than anyone imagined possible. And Reed Ferring believes the age of the Dmanisi fossils changes the human story.
But we were able to get out and take over the rest of the world much earlier than any of us ever guessed that we could have. It's a chance really for us to rethink what it actually took to get out of Africa, to make this great leap in our history.
Exactly what was required for Erectus to thrive at Dmanisi. Ferring is digging up clues.
One of the most common things we find in the excavations at Dmanisi are small, round stones. Here we have a nice cluster of stones in place that illustrate the kinds of stones that we find at the site. If a geologist takes one look at these stones, he knows that they must have come from a river.
But the ancient river was several hundred yards from where the cobbles are found. No natural process moved them. Erectus did. Why?
They show no modification. They haven't been used as pounding implements or anything.
The small cobbles have one thing in common. Of the hundreds found, every one fits neatly in a hand. And that's the key clue. Ferring believes these stones are for throwing. They are weapons. And that's exactly what Erectus needs. Dmanisi is full of predators like saber-toothed cats that could easily kill and devour an early human. But Erectus is smart enough to fight back. Erectus may be the first human to use a weapon to drive away carnivores. In a giant leap, he's mastering his environment in a new way. The stones at Dmanisi may be evidence of prehistoric battles.
This is really the simplest form of weaponry that we could imagine for humans. Throwing things is something that humans are able to do. I don't know of any other animals that are capable of doing it with any accuracy at all.
Long, accurate throwing is so complex that special brain hardware is required to learn it. A very human kind of brain circuit. Erectus has to evolve this way to survive in a dangerous world.
We don't have teeth, we don't have claws. The only possible way we could survive is with our wits.
The clues now all come together. Erectus was a creature who was suddenly taking charge of his environment, more like a modern human. He may have fended off big cats with projectile weapons. He survived winter thanks to his adaptable mind. And because of a body built for endurance running, he could cover long distances. And that's precisely what he did. Erectus embarked on an epic journey to the east. Over the course of millennia, Erectus travels thousands of miles. He crosses deserts. He traverses mountains. He finds his way through jungles. He reaches the Indonesian island of Java, connected at the time to Asia by a land bridge. Now, he can go no farther by foot, but even this doesn't stop Erectus. Somehow he continues his odyssey in what may have been the first human conquest of the sea, eventually landing on the remote island of Flores. Only one other large, warm-blooded creature made the dangerous sea crossing to this Indonesian island. Stegodons, which swam like their elephant kin do today, made the crossing 850,000 years ago, using their trunks as snorkels. Stone tools found on Flores prove that Erectus made it here by 800,000 years ago. How long did Erectus outbound survive on this far-flung island? The answer comes with one of the greatest finds in the last 50 years. The discovery will reveal the fate of our last known surviving rival. In our ancient past, no character looms larger than Erectus. While some of these early humans made an epic journey all the way to Indonesia, others remained in Africa and took their own giant strides on the road to becoming human. On the shores of Lake Turkana, Louise Leakey is finding evidence that Erectus survived one of the most bizarre periods our ancestors ever witnessed. Here, almost 2 million years ago, Erectus was not alone.
This landscape here, 1.8 million years ago, certainly had several different species of hominid that were walking along a landscape together, and they saw each other.
In fact, more walking apes lived together here than at any other time and place we know of. Erectus lives alongside at least 2 other early humans. One of them may be a kind of thief, stealing leopard's prey. Call him Handyman. At the same time and place, a third species survives. We'll call him Nutcracker. To thrive on his coarse diet, he is a chewing machine with huge molars. Nutcracker's jaw muscles are so massive, they need extra bone area to attach to. That's the purpose of the weird ridge on top of his head and his flying buttress cheekbones. How do Erectus, Handyman, and Nutcracker, 3 experiments in human design, get along?
They must have had thoughts about one another. There's speculation about whether there was antagonism between any of these species. We haven't found any bashed up skulls.
Leakey doesn't yet know how Erectus treated the other species, but a fossil found at her site reveals Erectuses treated each other in a very human way. One Erectus suffers from an excruciating bone condition. It may come from eating too much liver. An excess of vitamin A causes her bones to swell and her skeleton to pull apart. No other species could survive a similar illness. Somehow, she does. One explanation makes the most sense. Someone must be taking care of her. In the entire human fossil record, this could be the first evidence of a decidedly human trait: compassion. Did compassion give Erectus a survival edge? We don't know what happened to Nutcracker and Handyman, only that they disappear from the fossil record over 1 million years ago. Only Erectus endured. Erectus was smarter and more adaptable. But according to Lee Berger, even these talents don't guarantee survival.
Evolution plays a game of chance at all times, and it's often just chance on which species survives. There are no real obvious directions.
So, through a combination of luck and talent, Erectus prevails. And elsewhere in Africa, he is about to take what may be the biggest leap in human history. At a cave called Swartkrans, remarkable evidence has turned up. A pit more than 1 million years old containing burnt animal bones. If this wasn't the result of a natural blaze, then it's the oldest controlled fire ever found. modern humans didn't stoke this fire. Field experiments show the bones weren't charred in brush fire. They burned in a campfire. The evidence points to an amazing, though controversial, conclusion. Erectus is the first to master fire. This skill changes the course of human evolution, separating Erectus even further from other walking apes. The ability simply to tend a fire means Erectus is doing something completely new. According to anthropologist Richard Wrangham, he is overcoming an innate fear.
To work with fire, you have to resist a lot of impulses. So probably we were already seeing a species on the road to controlling its emotions in a human-like way.
Harnessing fire may trigger a cascade of changes in Erectus's behavior, body, and brain. Before fire, only our tree climbing skills protect us from the predators of the African night. After fire, Erectus can sleep on the ground as flames keep carnivores at bay. He's then free to evolve arm and hand shapes for goals other than hoisting himself into branches. But the control of fire has an even more profound effect on the life of Erectus. Cooking.
The step from moving from eating raw food to cooked food is as big an improvement in the quality of the diet as happened in the whole of the history of life. Raw meat is hard to chew. It's tough. I spent years in Africa watching chimpanzees, and they're always ready to try and catch meat, catch a monkey and kill it if they possibly can. They love meat. The problem with it is they probably would have had to chew meat for 4 to 5 hours a day. It's very difficult to chew it fast enough. So chimpanzees, from our calculations, get only about as much calories per hour from chewing raw meat as they do from chewing fruit.
If so, meat wasn't particularly valuable to early humans until they figured out how to tenderize it.
What could they have done?
Fire is the best way to make meat tender. Erectus probably didn't start fires at first. Instead, he would have collected fire caused by lightning. Fire and cooking could have cut 5 hours of chewing a day down to 1. And Wrangham thinks cooking did more. It further changed the shape of the early human body. Fast calories from cooked food drive a growth spurt. Erectus becomes 50% taller than earlier humans and reaches our own height. Cooked food requires less digestion, so his intestines and rib cage get smaller. Thanks to softer food, Erectus's jaw muscles shrink, freeing the skull and the brain to get bigger. A bigger brain and a powerful new tool, fire. Did this combination make Erectus, our direct ancestor, the ultimate survivor? With his control of fire and his growing brain, Erectus is the Superman of his day. But how does he fare against a tough competitor? Near Swartkron, South Africa, evidence reveals that Erectus lived alongside another early human called Robustus. Paleoanthropologist Lucinda Backwell is studying Robustus. Her recent discoveries tell us what kind of rival he was. Like Erectus, Robustus solved a critical problem: eating enough protein to power his large brain. Brain tissue burns 16 times more calories than muscle tissue at rest. Erectus probably got his protein by scavenging for meat. If Backwell finds that Robustus was also eating meat, it may be a clue that Robustus and Erectus competed head-to-head for the same food. Experts long believed Robustus was a plant-chewing simpleton, not in the same league as Erectus. But a recent chemical analysis of Robustus's fossils suggests he was somehow eating animal protein. Where and what was he hunting?
The environment when Erectus and Robustus lived here was really very much the same as today. The carnivores at the time were lots of hyena, all of the big cats, leopard, panthers, lion. It was a very dangerous environment. These ape-men that were living here were really the hunted. They were the prey of the carnivores.
So Erectus and Robustus were the hunted. On the way to getting enough protein, they also had to dodge predators. Clues to how Robustus got his protein are hidden in bone tools discovered near his fossils. To find out how Robustus used his tools, Backwell makes duplicates for a field test. Then she digs for tubers. Erectus probably did this, so why not Robustus too? Then she searches for insects, gouging the tree bark. Finally, she digs for termites. Like a crime scene investigator, she compares resin casts of the ancient Robustus tools and her own tools from her field experiments. The scratch-by-scratch comparison gives her a break in the case. The marks from termite digging look like those on the ancient tools of Robustus.
It was a very clear match. We think Robustus was the user of these tools and that he was using them to forage for termites.
Chimps are renowned for using twigs to probe for termites. But chimps gather termites only in the rainy season, exploiting holes created by the termites themselves as they leave their nests. But Robustus, with his stronger tool, could break into the concrete hard mud year-round.
It's interesting because 100 grams of fish, that gives one 74 calories. 100 grams of steak gives one 340 calories. And the same amount of termites, 560 calories. So they're full of fat and protein.
So if Robustus didn't eat red meat, he didn't compete directly with Erectus. What was their relationship?
When one considers that these two ape-men are living on the same hill, it's of course really fascinating and tantalizing.
Two early humans lived here. Both found animal protein. Both were smart, but one may not have been smart enough.
It must have been kind of like that television show Survivor, where everyone's trying to get as much out of the environment as they can at any one time, and they're trying to outcompete and outsurvive the other one. And one of them eventually doesn't.
Evidence found in Erectus's fire pit indicates that Robustus wasn't his rival at all. Instead, he may have been his prey. Disturbingly, among the charred fossils, researchers found a finger bone of Robustus. Did Erectus, our ancestor, kill and eat another human?
Was that someone eating a close relative? There isn't any reason to think not. So it wouldn't be surprising if Homo erectus went out for a little bushmeat and found another bipedal ape.
Whether Erectus routinely ate the competition isn't known, but Erectus was taking charge of his environment. Again and again, he left his rivals behind. He is looking very much like the ultimate survivor. Erectus, our Adam, is a dynamo. With a body built for travel and a brain built to adapt, he will give rise to a remarkable range of humans. In South Africa, Lee Burger is on Erectus's trail, and Burger has unearthed yet another critical clue in our story. Here at a site called Hujjispint, several 100,000 years ago, hyenas dragged some kind of human into their den. It's impossible to say if the hyenas killed him or scavenged him as a corpse. Today, Burger is excavating this ancient grave, a fossilized hyena den. Animal bones tumble out, and so do human remains. This site is a rarity, an opportunity to peer into what Burger calls the dark zone.
The dark zone is that period between about 200,000 and 600,000 years where we have almost no human fossils in Africa. Hujjispint is one of the places that preserves really good ones, the rarest fossils that you can find.
The fossil bone Burger has found is not from Erectus. It's from his spawn, a supersized human species we call Goliath.
This is the tibia of Goliath, if you will. It's a fantastic specimen, 280,000 years old from here at Hujjispint. It represents one of these giants. It would have belonged to an individual that was maybe 6 foot tall. What's amazing is that we think it's from a child or a female, and that puts it right off the scale in height. It was a real giant.
Goliath appeared 700,000 years ago, and he wasn't the only giant.
One of the strange things about that period is that many of the animals are enormous.
Zebras weigh 80 kilos more than today's species, and Cape buffalo have horns 3 meters across, more than 2.5 times as wide as their living relatives today. Environmental forces that boost animal size made Goliath huge too. And as a hunter, Goliath would have to get bigger to keep pace with growing prey. He's locked in an ancient arms race. Goliath comes up with walking ape's next major invention, the throwing spear. Finely balanced, it's the ballistic missile of its day. It's the earliest evidence of a weapon manufactured for throwing.
Could you hand me those calipers? Sure.
Burger and paleoanthropologist Steve Churchill know Goliath was big. But just how big was this giant? There's only one way to find out. They've got to build him. Goliath's fossils contain powerful clues to his size. The investigators measure bones from one of the largest Goliath specimens to get a sense of his frame. The area of his eye socket gives an estimate of body weight. The area of the ball joint of his thigh gives a separate weight estimate. The length of his thigh is a good clue about his height. As Burger and Churchill run the numbers, they are in for a shock. Goliath was huge. He is the tallest and most massive human species ever discovered. To build their model, they merged their data with images of modern and ancient human body types. They're trying to hit on a credible combination of height and weight.
So the problem is we've got to find a body shape for this reconstruction. Okay, so what do you have here?
This Goliath is 90 kilos, 33% heavier than the biggest erectus. They try to picture this weight on a body shaped like the first modern humans in South Africa.
That's right off the screen. That's like 7.5 feet tall.
Next, they try a Neanderthal-shaped body.
Well, it's obviously got to be more wide-bodied. What about if you put it on a Neanderthal type?
That's not going to work. I mean, that body shape's an adaptation to a cold climate, and this is Africa.
Finally, they try a wide body with long limbs. They settle on a 193-centimeter frame, a giant compared to any other early human.
I don't think we're going to do better with that. I think we have to go with that shape for the reconstruction.
I agree. Let's build it.
When they look Goliath in the eye, will they discover why he is extinct and we survived? In a South African lab, scientists and artists are starting work on a full-scale reconstruction of Goliath. Churchill thinks Goliath was nature's attempt to push the envelope of body size. Did his huge frame have a fatal downside in the heat of Africa? In a low-tech twist, Churchill uses birdseed to measure Goliath's volume. Too much volume could be lethal.
By measuring the volume of our model, I get an idea of mass. Because the more mass you have, the more muscle you have, the more organs that are creating heat.
Goliath used twice the energy our bodies do. So Goliath's engine was huge. What investigators want to know now is, how effective was his radiator? How did he avoid overheating and melting down? Skin is the most essential organ for keeping modern humans cool. It's our radiator. Goliath's skin would have worked in the same way. Did he have enough of it? To answer the question, Churchill must flay the giant and measure his entire skin. The area of this skin will reveal a deadly weakness in Goliath's design. Whatever his strengths and limitations, Goliath shares with his ancestor erectus a desire to move. Scientists think that over 500,000 years ago, he became the second early human to leave Africa, and some believe the first to colonize Western Europe. Investigators are finding evidence in France that Goliath was becoming more human. They're discovering mysterious patterns of rock from Goliath's day. One interpretation is that he was adapting to Europe's cold climate by building crude shelters. Other evidence suggests that one group of Goliaths met with disaster. In northern Spain, scientists discovered the fossil remains of over 30 Goliaths, men, women, and children, at a site called the Pit of Bones. The victims all died around the same time. They might have been cut down by an epidemic. Some might have been cannibalized. Investigators just don't know what happened. Halfway around the world on the island of Flores, researchers have picked up the trail of a human even weirder than Goliath. It's a find that will capture the attention of the world. Scientist Bert Roberts knows that Goliath's ancestor Erectus arrived here over 800,000 years ago. But now, Roberts is finding stone tools from a time much closer to our own, and hints of something truly bizarre.
What we've got here is a flowstone, and this allows us to date the stone tools that are above it. We've got one above, which we've already dated to 100,000 years ago. What we now want to know is this 200,000 years old or 150,000 years old?
Whether the tools go back 100,000 years or a little more, they are notable because they would be among the most recent Erectus artifacts ever found in Asia. That is, if Erectus made these tools. The mystery deepens when the archaeologists make another discovery. Spear points less than 20,000 years old. Could Erectus have survived until so recently? Or was someone else living in this cave? Other evidence suggests that whoever made the spear points was a skilled hunter. The scientists find teeth from the primitive elephant stegodon and bits of Komodo dragon. Archaeologist Mike Morwood has proof that the early humans in this cave were thriving.
Here, people are clearly using fire. We have evidence for cooking, for the butchering of animals. Rats, bats, some fishing.
But who was this hunter? To find out will require finding more bones. Early human bones. That's always a long shot, but working in this cave improves the odds.
Caves like this are just perfect, because the limestone is a great preserver of fossil bone, whereas once you're out there in the open air, you've got very little chance of getting things preserved for a long time.
The team soon digs up the missing clue, the bones of the hunter. Morwood was away when Indonesian colleagues called. They said they'd found a tiny skeleton. It looked like a child's. But the next call gave Morwood the biggest surprise of his career.
And the next day, they said, it's not a child, it's just a very, very small adult, and it's not a modern human.
The bones were not what anyone expected. They were bizarre, as if Erectus had shrunk to half his size. Who was this tiny creature? This ancient hobbit? Investigators know that our ancestor Erectus arrived here over 800,000 years ago, but they haven't found his fossils. Instead, they found a totally unexpected, remarkable creature.
The head was at this end here, and the body extended out in this direction, and this area here was dated to about 18,000 years old.
For Roberts, it's a spectacular revelation. This creature didn't live hundreds of thousands of years ago. It survived later than any other early human known. Some were alive only 13,000 years ago. But there's something even stranger than its recent date: its size. Scientists nicknamed this creature the Hobbit.
Here's one of the arm bones of the Hobbit. So you can see it's half the size of my arm, and everything else was half size in the Hobbit, half our height. No one had imagined that humans could be that small in the recent past.
Before announcing their tiny human to the world, the team had to convince themselves that the bones they'd found, of over half a dozen individuals, didn't belong to small modern humans like pygmies.
Well, if you look at pygmies, they don't look like the Hobbit at all. Things about the ears, things about the teeth, things about the skull anatomy, things about the bones also indicate he's not a modern human of any sort. It's not a young person who's still growing. The way the bones are fused, the way the teeth are, and the skull. All of those indicators are that it's a fully grown adult.
The hobbit is indeed a new and strange human species. But what happened to Erectus? Amazingly, scientists think that over time, Erectus became the hobbit. How did he get so small? Another species, the stegodon, was large when it arrived on Flores, but hundreds of thousands of years isolated on an island forced changes. Large animals got smaller and became more efficient.
It helps if you're small on a very restricted base such as Flores. The smaller the island, the smaller you get.
The opposite is true for reptiles. They tend to get bigger.
Reptiles don't need to create heat. They're basically cold-blooded animals, so they can afford to get bigger. In fact, it helps them to do so because then they can eat the dwarfed-down versions of the herbivores.
Evidence found at the cave reveals that hobbits had to contend with 10-foot-long Komodo dragons, even as these early humans were gradually shrinking.
It's the first time that it's actually been shown that people do shrink when they get stranded in the same sorts of environments as other mammals. But until this point in time, everyone said, oh no, we're too clever to do that. We don't shrink, we adapt, and we therefore, we just move into better places. Rubbish. We shrink just like any other mammal. We're an animal. We do exactly what every other animal does.
The hobbit proves that early humans like Erectus could undergo radical transformations. Erectus spawned Goliath, who towered over the prehistoric world, reaching more than 193 centimeters. On the island of Flores, Erectus gave rise to the hobbit half that height. The startling conclusion? When nature says grow, we grow. And when it says shrink, we shrink.
There you go there, Ruckus.
Hobbit radius.
You'd think that the hobbit would be at a disadvantage when it came to hunting. But his favorite prey was just as downsized, the pygmy stegodon. 27-kilo hobbits may have needed teamwork to bring down a tusked 400-kilo mini-elephant. The Hobbit forced investigators to consider an astonishing prospect, that evidence of other human creatures still undiscovered must be out there.
So we're going to have a situation where you've got many different hominid species in this part of the world. Populations which have evolved in isolation on other islands.
Many of Indonesia's islands could have molded their own unique forms. Each island, its own laboratory of human adaptability. The spectacular discovery of hobbits throws an even brighter light on Erectus as the central figure in our investigation. He gave rise not only to the smallest human species, the hobbit, but also the largest, Goliath. While the hobbit revealed one human extreme, Goliath was showing us another.
It's easy for me to sort of think of them in terms of numbers, but to actually see this on a human being, to actually see it fleshed out, I think is going to be remarkable. It's going to make it real for me.
Wow. Fantastic.
Wow. He's huge.
He is huge. He's actually bigger than I thought. Look at the size of the arms. They really are giants.
Yeah.
There's just no other way to describe them, are there? I mean, it's out of all the proportions that you see him. To see one alive is incredible.
I think that this is a guy who probably had a problem staying cool.
Goliath's huge frame helped him in an Africa overrun with giant animals. but he may have paid a fatal price for his size. The measurements reveal that this Goliath would have churned out 100% more heat than our bodies do, but he had only 50% more skin area. Big engine, small radiator. Goliath couldn't survive in hot and humid places where sweating doesn't cool you down.
He was limited to dry environments. He's a thirsty guy, and he's got to stay close to water sources.
Nature may have pushed Goliath too far. He was often at risk of boiling over. And that may be why he went extinct about 240,000 years ago. But Goliath left a legacy. It's a species that appeared around 200,000 years ago. We are that species. Homo sapiens, modern humans. Goliath is our father.
What the fossil evidence shows us now is that our ancestors were giants. They were creatures that were much bigger in their mass and stature than humans are today, all except the very rarest, the very biggest of all humans.
With Homo sapiens, humans have at last become physically modern, but our minds still lag behind. One more giant step remains in the journey from ape to man. On the southern coast of Africa, the trail of clues leads to a species spawned by Goliath, us. Modern humans have skills that separate us from every other species in the history of life. Here, in a place called Blombos Cave, archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood has found evidence of tremendous leaps forward in our mental development between 50 and 100,000 years ago. For the first time, we were making things that weren't absolutely necessary for survival. That's the very definition of modern human culture. Henshelwood is excavating clues about this mental revolution. It's some of the earliest evidence of modern humans organizing their living space.
Close to the front of the cave, over here, is where people were building their fireplaces.
This isn't random. Fire burning at the cave entrance keeps predators out.
And we can see along this wall, these dark marks indicate the charcoal from those fireplaces. They probably slept in the area behind over here.
They sleep in the most comfortable part of the cave.
Stone tools and the bone tools they were making would have been done over here.
They are refining their tools and weapons.
One of the most extraordinary items we find in the cave is this bone point. Very carefully produced, very carefully honed from a single piece of bone. This is a remarkable item.
Remarkable because these tools are far better than they need to be. Many creatures use tools, some even craft and shape them. But only modern humans have a sense of pride or beauty that drives their work. What caused such a dramatic break from the past? Answers may lie in the ocean at their doorstep.
Food is easily available, very close to the cave. Shellfish, fish.
Scientists have found that seafood powers a growing brain better than any other natural food.
This would have been relatively a paradise, if you like, a Garden of Eden. You're not spending your whole day, in other words, chasing animals across the landscape because you're desperate to eat. So you do have time to sit around the cave and ponder and work on your bone tool and perhaps polish it a bit more and to make a standard that is beyond what is required.
Easy access to food and water gave us spare time. Time to think and apply our brains to new problems. Henshelwood has found evidence of the first stirrings of the modern human mind. Shaped chunks of an iron pigment called ochre. Some of the pieces appear to have been scraped, as if to create a flat surface. Even more convincing are grooves on two of the pieces. The stones show a regular pattern, the result of a deliberate series of choices. The patterns may be a message, an early use of symbols, or an ancient form of art. Whatever the case, they are something entirely new in the history of life. No other animals, including earlier models of humans, ever did this. Well over 50,000 years ago, the people of the cave organized their living space much as we do today. And what they made with an eye for beauty as much as function. About 750,000 years after our father Goliath left Africa, we left on the third Great Migration. Equipped with unprecedented brain power, some of us headed to Europe. Here, about 35,000 years ago, modern humans encountered another human species. It was Neanderthal, probably a descendant of Goliath, just like us. With skin lightened to suit the new climate, we meet our sibling species face to face. What happens? It's possible that modern humans fight deadly battles with Neanderthal and even have a hand in their extinction. Whatever the cause, Neanderthal vanishes about 27,000 years ago, leaving us to dominate the playing field. But we weren't completely alone yet. We still had company in Indonesia, just north of Australia. In fact, modern humans made it to Australia 45,000 years ago. But to get there, they had to pass through Flores. And that means for thousands of years, modern human migrants likely shared this island with a species of tiny early humans, hobbits.
I think there's no way that they cannot have known each other on their way through it. I'd like to think that Homo sapiens were very nice to the hobbit, but the reality is that we're not nice to most of the animal species we come across.
What was the nature of the interaction between these two species? Did they, get on and trade, or was it one of competition? Did modern humans, eat little hominids? We don't have any evidence for the nature of the interaction yet. And it would be fascinating to actually find out why they continued to live here for so long.
Modern humans and hobbits probably came face to face. One had a brain capable of remarkable invention. The other was fine-tuned for life on Flores. Then, catastrophe struck. And one species was lost forever. A huge volcanic explosion may have wiped out half-sized humans, hobbits. The abruptness of the devastation shows up as a sharp line on a cave wall.
Coming up to this level here in the cave, this is the time of a major volcanic event which deposited this volcanic ash, and that's been dated to about 12,000 years ago. But above this point we've got no more remains of stegodon, not the big ones nor the small ones, and no more remains of the hobbit either.
1 meter of ash fell here, the signature of an explosion potentially bigger than Krakatoa, one of the most massive eruptions in modern history. If not for this chance disaster 12,000 years ago, hobbits might still be alive. So how did modern humans survive this kind of cataclysm? It helped that we were spread around the world, not concentrated on a single island like hobbits. But did we also have something extra? Unique skills that made us the ultimate survivors. Scientist Spencer Wells thinks the answer is in our blood. By analyzing genes from people around the world, Wells has made a startling discovery about our struggle to survive. We almost didn't make it.
At some point in the past 70,000 years, we nearly went extinct.
Wells thinks he knows what took us to the brink. A volcanic eruption so powerful, it changed the Earth's climate.
There was a volcanic eruption which probably caused the Earth to cool down for several years.
The consequence in Africa may have been a deadly drought. There's no way to know how many of us died, only how many lived.
We have this genetic result that the population crashed to as few as 2,000 individuals.
Just 2,000 left, scattered around Africa 70,000 years ago. It was almost the end of the human race. This great squeeze on our population is a key marker in human history. All of us alive today come from the survivors who made it through, a group the size of a village. If the eruption had been slightly bigger, we could have gone extinct, and Earth today could belong to our competitors. But Wells thinks that we survived because of more than just chance.
You had to be smart in order to survive.
Only the most clever and creative lived through it. So the Great Squeeze made our species smarter.
It may have taken a global catastrophe to actually kickstart the human mind into high gear.
If Wells is right, our minds were becoming modern surprisingly early. Most experts believe that modern human behavior emerged 40,000 years ago. That's when paintings and carvings suddenly appeared all over Europe. But Wells thinks that 30,000 years earlier, most survivors of the Great Squeeze had these same abilities. In fact, the genetic seeds of this creativity, call them ultimate survivor genes, must have been scattered around Africa even before the Great Squeeze. When the catastrophe hit, anyone who lacked them died. Blombo's Cave on the South African coast may be one place where early survivor genes flourished. In the cave, investigators are finding evidence of a mental revolution recorded in the shells of a tiny snail. They've found dozens of the shells, but they were too small to eat. So why were the shells in the cave? Each has a small hole in roughly the same position. Were the holes natural or man-made?
I went into the laboratory at the museum one day and I noticed on the lip small facets which were not present on natural shells. And that aroused my suspicions.
Opposite edges of the holes have flat areas, as if they've been worn away over time. Henshelwood's hunch is that the shells were beads, once strung together in a bracelet or necklace. One more piece of evidence clinches the case. The shells are dusted with ochre pigment. Someone colored them. That's powerful evidence they were jewelry. The significance? You don't wear jewelry unless you care what others think about you. And that's a uniquely human trait. Small as they are, the shells point to a huge leap into a modern way of thinking.
Once your behavior is in a sense controlled by symbolism, or in this case by perhaps beads or personal ornaments, then you're becoming modern.
If we can pinpoint when early humans made these beads, we'll know when we jumped from living like animals to living like us. 10,000 years ago, everyone was making jewelry. 80,000 years ago, nobody was. So just how old is this jewelry? To find out, scientist Zenobia Jacobs excavates sand from the cave layers where others found the shells. The sand contains a kind of clock that records the years since it was last hit by the sun's rays. By blasting the grains with a laser, Jacobs zeroes in on the bead's age. The date is dramatic. The beads are 75,000 years old. They are the world's oldest jewelry with a scientifically solid age. Modern humans made these beads 30,000 years earlier than most researchers believed was possible.
Blombos Cave and other sites in Africa are increasingly producing evidence suggesting to us that modern human behavior evolved in Africa at a point much earlier than we thought. And essentially, we're now looking at a whole new version of understanding when we became what we are.
Did the dawn of modern human behavior really occur so early? What about other great leaps, like the invention of clothing? A clue comes from a parasite that plagued us for millennia, the louse. Body lice evolved from head lice, but the body louse lives only between skin and close-fitting clothes, not just the rough animal hides worn by some early humans. If scientists can determine when body lice split off from head lice, they will know when we invented clothing. DNA analysis reveals the answer. 72,000 years ago, about the same time that the people of Blombos were putting on eyeliner and jewelry. These new discoveries provide a stunning new portrait of our ancestors. Over 70,000 years ago, modern humans at Blombos are clever and creative. During the Great Squeeze, when climate change almost wipes out our species, people like these are most likely to survive. Their direct descendants reach Europe 45,000 years ago, carrying the torch of human creativity.
What happened at the dawn of creativity? We know very little about the genes that control those sorts of characteristics. What are those key genetic changes which made us fully modern? That's the Nobel Prize winning question.
What ignited the modern mind? Part of the answer may lie in the power of our tongues. Mutations are hit and miss. Mostly miss. The majority of genetic changes bring about terrible results. The rare few deliver an advantage and prompt an unexpected jump. To piece together the small steps and big leaps that make up the human evolutionary journey, we have to use every clue available. For Spencer Wells, this means another close examination of our genes.
Throughout human evolution, we have gone through these periods where there have been massive changes. Most of these would have been caused by genetic changes, by mutations in the DNA.
Compare the nearly identical gene from a chimp. The human gene differs in small but extremely important ways. 2 mutations in this gene appeared in us 1 to 200,000 years ago. These changes allowed us to move our mouths and tongues in new ways. In turn, this new physical ability may have set us down the path to developing language. And language sets us apart from other animals. More than any other human talent, it is the ultimate mental power tool. Language makes it possible to share ideas. It lets us communicate about what might be. But language may point to another advantage. Primate researcher Richard Wrangham finds a clue to this edge when he compares human societies to chimps.
Chimps don't have the ability to control the bullies within their own communities, and as a result, they're just a typical despotic species.
Compared with chimps, we are surprisingly non-violent.
Within society, we're incredibly peaceful. We're very nice to each other. Chimpanzees have rates of violent aggression with each other about 100 to 1,000 times as frequently within communities.
Between one society and another, our species can be extremely violent. After all, we fight wars. But what accounts for our relative peacefulness within our communities? The answer, according to Wrangham, is language. For eons, every ape or human society had some members who tried to bully others. When language came along, it allowed the weak to team up against the bullies. That's how we still work out our problems today.
We don't have an alpha male who bullies the rest. We have a group of the non-alphas who bully the alpha. We have a coalition of the timid.
Over time, Wrangham says, the timid hatched plots and actually murdered large numbers of bullies.
That kind of killing has selected against the genes that make people aggressive within groups.
With the rise of language, small groups of people grew into societies. These societies became peaceful because they were weeding out the bullies. As we made ourselves cooperative, physical changes that began long ago with the walking ape called Lucy accelerated. Our skulls, once thick to protect us from each other, get thinner. With fewer threats, stress drops dramatically, and our brain chemistry changes. Thanks to genetic mutations that led to language, we became a new breed of human, far more peaceful and cooperative than any previous walking ape.
One of the enormous advantages that we modern humans would have had over any other species that we encountered is that we work well together. We cooperate well within our own species.
Cooperation lets us build on each other's inventions. Compared to modern humans, Goetalone erectus comes up short. He invents a great tool. Call it Axe 1.0. But it doesn't change for a million years. He uses it for just about everything. It isn't so much the right tool for the job, it's the only tool. We are different.
When we have a problem, we have a never-ending supply of ideas. We can take any types of tools and use them to solve the problem. Tools that we have, or we can invent tools. We can go on and on, always creating a new tool to solve the same problem or any problem that comes along.
Consider the tuber. Early erectus dug it up with axe 1.0 and ate it raw. For us, there's more than one way to skin a tuber. We can slice, dice, rice, fry, broil, and bake. In fact, we'll never stop coming up with ideas. We are the ultimate survivors because we have an infinite toolkit, our brains. Amazing discoveries are outdating the textbooks and giving us an altogether new picture of our story.
From the present day, we have a very distorted view of what human history has been. Human history has not been one human species, ourselves, living on this planet for the last 2 million years. It's been a whole host of human species.
For millions of years, nature dabbled with the human form. Many of these walking apes encountered each other. But the human tree starts to thin out as you climb from Erectus to Goliath to us. When our species left Africa around 60,000 years ago, we were one lucky breed of human. We'd survived a close brush with extinction, the Great Squeeze 20,000 years before, and we were the smarter for it. In Europe, we met Neanderthal. The encounter may have been as charged as that between Cain and Abel, for we both likely came from the same father, Goliath, and we were rivals for the same land. Only 13,000 years ago, we had what may have been our last encounter with another kind of human, the hobbit in Indonesia. Now, all of the others are gone. Nature's lab in human experiments is closed. We are the last man standing. Luck played a role in our success, just as it does for any other animal that avoids extinction. But talent also contributes to our unique circumstances today.
This is probably the only time in the last 4 million years that there's only one form of human walking around on the planet. And I think that the downfall of our Goliath and the downfall of the Neanderthals and the downfall of Erectus was us. It was our brains, our adaptability, our innovativeness. We were just simply better at doing things than they were. And wherever we encountered them, we just outdid them. We outcompeted them. We brought this to pass, our being the only human occupants of this planet.
Our journey from ape to man has been one long, strange trip. Our infinite toolkit, our uncanny adaptability, our unique skill of language, and a good dose of serendipity combined to create the ultimate survivor. The advantage goes to the cooperative ape, us. And as luck would have it, we've taken off like a rocket.